Welcome to the cave of shadow and light. It is by journeying within our own consciousness we discover our true selves and nature, in the dark recesses and in the places where light enters. The cave is the womb of the warrior, the reflection of time before time, and the source of all that is. The cave is inside you. The Southern Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, ancient and nurturing, home to mostly Scottish, Irish, and English settlers who brought their work ethic, dreams of an abundant life, and superstitious yet religious belief systems. Reverend Allison Mullins grew up in the hollers of these mountains, just like me. A daughter of Pound, Virginia, deep in the coal fields, Allison was different. Not a child who adhered to the children should be seen but not heard rule book. She was deeply inquisitive, especially when it came to spirituality and theology, even as a very young Appalachian girl. Today, Allison is a self-described interfaith minister, priestess, Appalachian witch, vessel of love, and chanteuse. She is also a Reiki master practitioner and teacher, a licensed massage therapist, tarot intuitive, circle facilitator, and motivational speaker based in Johnson City, Tennessee. Her aura radiates pure love energy, and I am pleased to share her journey into the cave with you.
Well, I was always the weirdo. I was always the little child that was odd. No one really understood. I talked about strange things like fairies and little root men who lived in the garden. And I saw things that other people didn't see, and it made them very uncomfortable. So a lot of times they chose to not take me to church because I was a bit of a nuisance. I remember once, I think I was maybe 7 or 8, and my grandmother had taken me to the old regular Baptist church at the mouth of the holler. And so they were doing, the preacher was preaching a sermon, and I raised my hand to ask a question, and he did not like it. I wasn't understanding what he was talking about, so I was trying to get clarity, apparently, at 8 years old. And he looked at my grandmother and he said, "If you can't control this youngin', you better not bring her to church." She didn't. And I got to hang out with my papa in the hills and hunt and find out about herbs and roots and all the things that have shaped me up to this point. So instead of being completely consumed by the church, I got to be out in nature. And I got to be myself. It was still uncomfortable for my family, and especially after I grew up a little and hit puberty and had my own very strong opinions about the world. But my family loved me deeply. They just didn't know how to love me in the ways that I really needed because I was different. And I really truly believe that I was sent to disrupt the vacuum of my family. I was meant to stir a little fire under their asses because they needed it, because they were so, and they still are very much entrenched in that particular religion, but they're also very curious people. Oh. And a lot of my younger cousins are reaching out to me now for a little guidance, which really warms my heart. But during that time, it was a struggle for me. I was weird. I had glasses. I was chubby, and I was very opinionated. And so imagine the joy of that puberty. But I also, on some level, even at that time, I think I recognized I have to leave here. And I have to get out of here. And once I do, things are going to be different for me. And they were. But it was a ride. And so coming back home now still feels like home, but it's a little bittersweet.
Choosing an alternative spiritual path that differs in tradition can, and often does, cause rifts in families. However, Allison's path has not alienated her family, and we talked about that dynamic, the evolving relationships, and how she'd even learned folk magic from her older Appalachian family members.
You're looked down upon. You're considered, you're above your raisin. You're going against God's will. And how dare you question God?
That's right.
God is not to be questioned. God is to be obeyed. I had a problem with that. So having a problem with that, and still have a problem with that, I think they were fascinated, but I also think the fear kept them from asking a lot of questions. My mother was completely accepting. She has been completely accepting of me since I started my spiritual journey. She is a very simple and kind and loving woman. She doesn't quite understand on some levels what I'm talking about when I tell her these things, but she loves me unconditionally and supports me. And just the other day, I sent her something through the mail, a gift, to help her arthritis. It was a salve, an herbal salve. And she asked me how much it was, and I told her I didn't want any money for it, She's my mother. So she sent me a gift, and she sent me a statue of Oshun for my altar. And that was the first time my mother had ever, just without me, without my input, without me telling her, she found it on her own. She purchased it and she sent it to me. And I feel like that was almost directed from Oshun to say, I'm here. I see you. I'm supporting you, and everything's okay. And even your mother, who has no knowledge of this or understanding of it, can still embrace that part of you.
Yes.
That was huge for me. I cried like a little baby. And it was very, very much an affirmation that I'm on the right path.
Absolutely. And that in some way your mother sees the light.
She does.
She sees the light.
And I think a lot of my family does. They still call me and ask me about herbs, ask me about this and that. And, it's like ask a witch. They don't want anybody to know that they've asked the witch.
Right.
But, they're going to call me and find out, what should I eat for this, or what should I take for that, or how can I manage this? Some of them have called for a tarot reading, and they don't want anybody to know that, they're looking at the devil cards. But they also really, on some levels, I know they love and respect me. They just don't understand me.
That's right.
And that's okay. And I had to learn that in order for me to get along with my family, I have to love them where they are. And something interesting happened about 6 months after my initiation. My cousin called me freaking out. She'd had a dream that she was in New Orleans. She had gone into this shop, and there were roots hanging everywhere. And there was a short, round African woman dressed all in white with her head wrapped just the way mine was.
Wow, okay.
I'm pretty sure it was me in another life, or an ancestor working through me. And she took her to a back room, and she prayed, and she said an incantation, and she cracked an egg, and she read some bones, and gave her, a potion to drink. And I said, well, were you scared? She said, no, I felt really safe. She said, why do you think that is? I said, are you trying to have another baby? And she said, how do you know that? I said, well, she was working a fertility work for you. And she said, but I'm a Christian. I said, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing.
Yes.
We're just working on different paths because of our understanding and our soul's need to learn. I happen to be working on the path of Ifa, on the path of the Orisha and Vodou. And the ancestors, our collective ones in our blood lineage, and our collective ancestors through time on this planet work through us all the time to make the connections we need so that we can be healed and learn and grow. And you are just being given support on a different level, in a different dimension, and it's all the same. It would be just like me praying to God to bless your womb with his fruit. It's all the same. And she said, well, it kind of scared me. I said, it only scared you when you woke up and you were back in this particular dimension. And she said, oh, well, I guess that's okay. And I said, yeah, I think it is. You were just blessed, you know? So things like that make them think twice about it. And they'll say, I had a weird dream, or I got a feeling the other day. And I'm like, We come from a long line of natural Appalachian witches. These women didn't call themselves witches.
No.
They were just doing their work, whether it was planting by the signs, or if they, if you had an injury. My grandmother would put a red string around my ankle and then tie it to a big old oak tree. And it was transference, basically.
Yes, that's
it was
right.
old, traditional folk magic. And I'm sure it came over with the Scots-Irish, and it's part of our heritage. Did they call it that? No, because they love Jesus. But it was still work, and it was women's work, and you didn't talk about it. So it's still there. You're not going to squash witchcraft. You're not going to squash the intuition of women and the power of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. You're not going to squash the old hag who is wise and knows every root in the forest. She is eternal. She is as eternal as the earth. And when you try to squash that, that's when people become ill and sick. And our world has become sick because it has tried to squash the feminine for too long. So that's my work. The resurgence of the feminine and the honoring of the path of divinity and the path of healing and nurturing and the restoration of that on our planet, not just in women and the healing of women, but the collective healing of men, and allowing them to connect with their feminine side. So there's a lot. I realized I've gone on a tangent, but there's just so much to talk about and to connect all the dots in my life. So sometimes I feel like if I talk more about one thing or another, it's just because I'm trying to bring them all together in some way.
Allison next explains her year of initiation as a bride of Orisha in an ancient African spiritual tradition, how she was introduced to the Orishas, Oya, and her soul connection to New Orleans.
When I went through my year as an initiate, I had to shave my head and I had to wear white for an entire year. And I had to have my head wrapped when I was in public at all times to protect the new consciousness that had been seated in me. I was literally called the bride of Orisha. And when you become the bride of Orisha, you are married to spirit, and your head is shaved so that when the Orisha comes in and is seated in your consciousness, it has a throne on which to sit. And so Oshun, the Orisha of love and beauty, sexuality, pleasure, and all arts and music, dance, she called out to me very early on. And when she was seated in my consciousness, it was like nothing I could ever compare it to. It was so freeing and so liberating to be literally born again in that way, because you're a baby, basically. You're going back to newness and freshness, and you're starting over. When I went home for the first time, dressed in all my whites with my head shaved and a wrap on my head that was very, very African,
Right.
they did not know what to think about it. And I think they were honestly very scared to even ask questions about it. They didn't want to know. So what I would say is, it's part of my spiritual path. It's a commitment I've made to my spiritual path, and I'm wearing white for a year to honor that. It was the only way that I could communicate to them what was happening. Because if I had said to them, I shaved my head, I became initiated in an African religion, and I am now a priestess of a, thousands-year-old deity named Oshun, who is sitting in my consciousness right now. There's no way for me to communicate that to them. I moved to the Tri-Cities actually in 2000 and was here for a few years. It was 2002 when I first was introduced to the Orishas. I was in Timonium, Maryland at a sacred space convention. Witches, pagans, all the healing aspects, all the tribes were there. And there was a woman there named Shakma Windrum, and she was a former voodoo priestess who had become a priestess of the Enochian mysteries. And she was incredible. She inspired me so deeply. Her ritual, the closing ritual she did, rocked me to my core. And I felt this energy in me that had not been there before. Prior to the closing ritual, I had gone to a workshop called Powers of the Dark Orisha. I had no clue what that was, but I was deeply in my goth phase. So everything dark was just so delicious. And so I went to this ritual, and the guy who was leading it was a Babalawo from Maryland. He happened to be gay, and he was trained in candomblé, which is the traditional Brazilian aspect. After slavery, everything in the diaspora, wherever the people ended up, whether they were in Brazil or Cuba or New Orleans or Haiti, they all transformed and syncretized into new religions. So in Brazil, it became candomblé. In Cuba, it became Santeria or Lukumi. In New Orleans, it was voodoo. In Haiti, it was Vodun. And so all around the world, we had aspects of Africa that had been dispersed because of the slave trade. His was candomblé. And so I walk in, and we were supposed to pick up these beads, and they were called eleques. And you dip them in coffee, and then you cut them to symbolize what you wanted to cut out of your life. Well, apparently the beads I chose were Oyas, and Oya is the Orisha of change. She is transformation, creation through destruction, the hurricane, the tornado, the gentle breeze, a butterfly, a bird of prey, all things that rule the wind. But sometimes things have to die in order for things to be born again. So at the end of the ritual, he comes up to me, the priest comes up to me, and he said, "It's interesting you chose Oya's beads." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Well, you're wearing her colors today." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Have you been to New Orleans?" I said, "No, I haven't. I'm going in October for my birthday." And he laughed at me. And he said, "That's her city. You know she rules the hurricane, right?" And I was like, "Okay, whatever." I didn't really know what to think about all that. And I left. And I got in the elevator, and I'm going down to my room, and there's an old hag, an old crazy beautiful witch in the elevator. And she said, "Oh, I just saw you, baby." And I said, "You saw me upstairs?" She goes, No, the way you used to be." I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "When you lived in New Orleans, you were a bit of a whore on those riverboats." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "You were beautiful too. Beautiful, rich mocha skin." And he's like, "You could sing like the Dickens." And I said, "Okay." Noted. That night, I go down to the Bard Circle where there's drumming and singing and all types of instruments, and everyone's just having a fabulous time. And I get up and I feel like I need to sing, but I don't even know what I'm singing. It's just something comes to me to sing. And the rhythm is very African in nature, but I just get up and start chanting, and I don't even really know what I'm saying. So the guys come up to me later, the drummers, and they're like, "Do you practice voodoo or Santeria?" And I said, "No, I'm just, witch." And they're like, "Come on, you just sang a voodoo and chant to the sun."
Whoa.
And I said, "Okay, what's happening?" So the Orisha just took me for a ride. So that fall, when I went for my birthday in October, I was there. I stepped onto Bourbon Street, and everything flashed back, about 100 years back.
Oh my God.
My hands were brown. The gas lights were there. Everything was old. All the clothing, the people. About 30 seconds. And I come back, and this old black man on a bicycle wearing a top hat and sunglasses with one eye out of them drives by on his bicycle and says to me, "Where'd you go just now, Cher?" And I said, "About 100 years ago, I think." And he laughed and he goes, "Happens all the time." And he goes, he said, "Welcome home, baby." And I was like, what is going on?
Oh my God.
That year, we were there for 4 days. And then Hurricane Lily came through and we had to go home. Oya had taken me to New Orleans, and she had shown me, this is your place. This is where your spirit is going to expand and grow. This is where you belong. So I came home completely mesmerized by New Orleans, and I went every year for the next few years. And in 2005, I moved down there. And in 2005, Katrina came through. Oya needed me to see New Orleans before she had to come through. I got to experience it before it was destroyed, and I would do it all over again. Every second was worth it to me. But when that happened, it set a fire in me, and it was a catalyst for me to delve deeper into that particular tradition. And that's how it all started. And I found a teacher later, and then Oshun came in. I found out later that Oshun isn't even the Orisha that rules my head, it's Oya. But I had to go down the path of Oshun in order to realize that I had to make my way back to Oya. I had to go back to the beginning. So my next goal is initiation in Nigeria into the mysteries of Oya, the owner of the wind, the mother of the cemetery, the mother of the marketplace, the one who transforms. And so that's where I am now, a little girl from Pound, Virginia, by way of Maryland and New Orleans. It's completely changed my life. So I don't know why or how, but I have surrendered to it, and it's become part of me. And so that's my that's the mythos, I guess. That's the story on how it all happened. And there's a lot more, of course, but that would take hours to talk about.
So I asked Allison about her professional spiritual work and what a session with her might look like. Now, this led to a discussion around sacred sexuality and the divine feminine. We finished up with comments on multifocal spirituality, how we really aren't limited to one spiritual path.
I'm a licensed massage therapist, so I've been doing massage since about 2006 professionally, but pretty much all my life, I've been touching people and healing them with my hands and my spirit. I didn't know that I was doing that back in the day, but I was. My granny once told me I had hot hands. I didn't know what that meant back then. I do massage. I'm a Reiki master and a Reiki master teacher. I work with sound and vibration. I do tones and chants over the body. I do chakra balancing with toning and chant. I use singing bowls and tuning forks. And I'm an intuitive, so I can put my hands on people, and usually I'll see a vision, or I'll get a name or an ancestor that's around them that needs to communicate with them. Sometimes I'll say, oh, you really need to take this supplement, or you need to quit eating this. Things come through and I don't know why. So I just honor it, and I tell people, hey, do you want to know this? If you do, I'll tell you. If you don't, I can just push your muscles around for an hour, and that's fine too. Most people are very open, and I don't really know what a session's going to look like until it's happening. But once they step through the door, then my hand's just like, okay, we're doing this today. Sometimes a massage will turn into ugly crying and a hug and them venting about what's going on in their life, and then a card reading or whatever. I read tarot. I read cowrie shells, but I don't usually read those for my clients. That's a real personal thing for me. It's very connected to the Ifa tradition. I teach Reiki, and I teach workshops on sacred sexuality, and I work with my friend Ken Lyon. We have a thing we call co-creative connection. It's like a cuddle party, but we didn't really want to call it a cuddle party. So we have about once a month, we have people come in, and we all just come in our pajamas, and we eat chocolate and fruit, and we cuddle and massage each other, play with each other's hair. And it's a good opportunity for people to come and connect in a non-sexual way and receive touch and nurturing, and to feel safe. I realize that sometimes I'm the only person that touches some of my clients. You know, they're retired, or they're widowed, or divorced, or what have you. And I'm the only person that touches them once a week, once a month, whenever. But it just made me realize how starving really our culture is for touch, healthy touch that isn't just related to sex, because we've also taken our sexuality and we've demonized it, but we glorify it at the same time. So we're really fucked up in the head about our sexuality. We love it, but we also think it's really dirty. Yeah. So you can't talk about it, and you can't enjoy it, for God's sake. Nobody needs to know you're enjoying it. But for me, I started really just being very explicit about sexuality, and it made people in Johnson City very uncomfortable. I had a sacred sexuality discussion group for a while when I worked at Shakti in the mountains, and people were very unnerved by it. Some people were thinking that they could come and it would be an orgy, or that I was going to teach them how to have a 30-minute orgasm in 2 hours. No, we're talking about our sexuality. And so it was really big for this area. And I think people are still hungry for more of that. But I really feel like our culture has robbed us of the beauty of that aspect of our being. And so part of my work is bringing that to the surface and helping people to understand that it's not dirty, that it's a natural part of our health, and it's a part of our spirituality. Because if sexuality can bring forth new life, it can bring forth anything. Well, sexual energy is not just about our genitals. It is a life force energy. So using life force energy, you can make a baby. You can create a song, you can write a book, you can build a house, whatever you want to do, you're using your chi, your vital life force energy to create that. So when humans come together for intercourse, the energetic fields unite. And so when energetic fields unite, we amplify. So our power of creation is amplified double when we're together. If you move energy through the body in the proper channels, and you're doing it in a way that supports each other, you set a goal, you write it all down, put it under your bed, hang it over your pillow, meditate on it every night. Every time you have an orgasm by yourself or with your partner, you send that orgasmic energy to that list, and what you want to create. Visualize it in your mind. And at the point of orgasm, you send that energy forth to the universe to say, I'm claiming this with this vital life force energy that is mine, that I'm in control of. I choose this and I claim it for myself. And so this happened when I was little too. I didn't know I was manifesting with my sexuality. I was right before puberty. My father had left and I was living with my mom and we were struggling because she was working all the time. And I wanted a new stereo really bad. I wanted it so bad. And she's like, I don't have the money for this. Even the cheap one. I can't afford it. I'm sorry. So I tore the picture out of the sale paper that I wanted, and I put it under my pillow. And I would lie in bed and I would masturbate and I would think about my stereo. I don't know why I did it. I have no clue why I did it. I do now. But then I was just some weird kid thinking about my stereo. Yeah. Just diddling my little skittle, And so in about a month, she got a surprise bonus at work. And guess what she bought me? My stereo.
You got your stereo.
I got my stereo. I'm getting chills talking about this.
So good.
It's just so amazing how I was so intuitively doing these things when I was a little girl, but I had no clue what that was. Right. I was just in my own little world, in my little room in my trailer house, just trying to get the hell away from everybody else. And so I did that. So sexuality is life force energy. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's abundant, and it is something that we have at our disposal all the time. Whether you're cultivating, whether you're doing self-cultivation, whether you're doing it with a partner, whether you're doing it with a group. I know people who get together in groups and direct their sexuality and their energy and their orgasms to a mutual need. And that's what religions like the Christian church and we'll just call them the Abrahamic religions, the ones that consider sexuality only meant to be during child making, trying to conceive a child, only meant to be between a man and a woman. Sexuality can create, no matter if it's a man and a woman and a woman, a man and a man, you're still bringing vital life force energy together. So there are a lot of tantric and sacred sexuality practitioners out there who do not include gay or lesbian people or trans people in this. And for me, it only adds to the power when you bring in an aspect of yourself that is both masculine and feminine. It only adds to the power of creation because you got both running through. And so I want to bring sacred sexuality to the masses in that we're all capable of this. We all need to heal our relationship with our sexuality so that we can move forward and reclaim that power to create our own lives. When you take especially a woman's sexuality, we are made for pleasure. Our body is made for pleasure. And the more orgasms a woman has, the more she allows her partner to open because we are vessels for that. And so in taking away the power of women's sexuality, we've taken away all the power. And as a culture, you mess with people's sexuality, you mess with their lives and their ability to create the life they want. So my goal is teach people to take that power back, to not be ashamed of bliss, to not be ashamed of nudity and the joy of swimming naked or rolling around in mud just because you want to, squishing your toes into something gooey, whatever you want to do. Bring back your sensuality and learn to be not only in your body, but to be celebrating your body. Well, and I want to reiterate too that it's not just Africa and witchcraft that resonates with me. I connect with so many different aspects of spiritual paths and traditions. I work with Yeshua Christ. Yes. I work with Mary Magdalene. They come to my room all the time when I'm working on people. Mary Magdalene sends me all kinds of information about my personal journey because she was a priestess. She was a high priestess of Isis, and she came in to help Jesus or Yeshua ascend so he could go through the death rites and come out the other side. Sacred sexuality was part of that. They were sacred divine partners. And in raising their vibrations through sexuality, he was able to defy death. And so when you think of her not as a whore, not as the downtrodden, fallen woman, she was a priestess of Isis. And in that tradition, it was very threatening to the old crazy men during that day. It was a tradition that they wanted to squash because they didn't want women to be in power. It was very terrifying to them. And so I'm pretty sure that I had a life as a Gnostic priestess in Mary Magdalene's ministry after Jesus finally died. And so when that comes through for me, I honor it just as much as I honor Oshun or Oya or any other thing, because they are spiritual masters. They are here to teach us. And no matter what their names are or which tradition they come from, I'm here to listen. And sometimes I'll say, okay, everybody in them are here. Angels, Orisha, ancestors, everybody in them. And so I work with everybody in them, and I'm okay with that.
Thank you for sharing this journey into the cave of shadow and light with our special guest, Allison Mullins. You can learn more and contact Allison through her website, AllisonMullins.com, as well as social media. To end our journey today, Allison very kindly allowed us to record a sacred invocation to share with all of you. Namaste.
Egun moy bai bai egun moy bai bai egun mobo moy bai bai egun moy bai bai egun Asher